G'day, Ancient Horror here. You know, when you're with somebody who's untreated with BPD, if you're the significant other, or, you know, you might be the adult child, you might be a sibling, you might be a friend, you might be a coworker, you might be the favorite person of somebody with BPD untreated. And most people in many of these roles are codependent to one degree or another, but especially in significant other relationships, maybe in being favorite person too. But why is it that after the BPD relationship breakup, I mean, not why is it you're devastated, but in your emotional devastation and the cognitive dissonance and not yet being able to break that unhealthy bond and the sort of everything that goes with that, not the sort of, but so many moving pieces of all of what that is like for people. And then what happens to a lot of people with codependency after the BPD relationship breakup, even if you're still in contact, and actually more so if you're still in contact than if you go no contact. Well, I've heard a lot of clients say, and people on live streams have said, now this is what other people are saying, not me. They'll say things like, quote, I can't believe I stayed with that person for, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. I'm an idiot. I'm a fool. What's the matter with me? People, this is what people say. And sometimes they express it in live streams and maybe the odd comment, but I hear a lot of it from clients, right? And so, people with codependency don't really emotionally feel enough about themselves, or you've been negating yourself. And also, there's this, why is it that when you're hurting so badly after a relationship with somebody with BPD, or it's on and off, or whatever the case is, that, lots of people are angry with the person with BPD. Lots of people are really like deriding and very devaluing of the people with BPD, and understandably what you've been through. And some people have compassion, and some people have empathy, even in their worst moments of pain. But what's really happening to you after that BPD relationship breakup, especially in a significant other relationship? You're feeling bad, you're hurting, you're missing them, you're all confused, cognitive emotional dissonance, etc. But what I know what's happening for a lot of clients I'm working with and have worked with for 30 plus years is that people with codependency, you're not your own best friends, right? That's what codependency recovery and healing is about, is forming that healthy relationship to and with self, knowing yourself better, and especially after a relationship with a person with untreated BPD or a narcissist. So much self-doubt happens there. You're not sure what's happened, really half the time in terms of how you've been treated and what's really hurt you so badly. And this is really challenging for people. So, okay, on the other side of these relationships, or when you're pretty sure it's over, or you've been ghosted, you might not know it's over, but you're in that world of hurt and then some, right? What happens then for people? Well, lots happens, but what am I here to address? What happens? People are really, really critical and hard on themselves. And there's this double, multi-layered, but double wound, if you will, of what's happened to you in the relationship in adulthood, or whatever relationship type, with somebody with BPD or a narcissist. And then what you may not yet be consciously aware of that happened to you in your childhood that created the codependency in the first place. And again, so many clients that I work with will say, I married my mother or father. It doesn't matter whether it's a woman who married a man with BPD. They'll realize, oh, wow, he's just like my mother, because mother was borderline. And people are just, discerning this more and more now due to all the information out there and the more accurate information, right, that explains more about the patterns. So people are starting based on pattern recognition And some people still have to do that Google typing in, right? And you definitely need to type in whatever you're experiencing, and then you find BPD, and it's like, okay, a whole other world is opening up to you. But here's the thing. You couldn't know that they had BPD. You couldn't know what that was before you had any reason to look for what was happening and to find that out, right? Especially the first time. There's other situations where it's different, but you couldn't know that. So if you're somebody today with codependency, you've been ghosted, the relationship's broken up, you might still want him back, you're still in contact, all this agony. Well, here's one thing that I hope you can think about, if it applies for you, it applies for a lot of people with codependency, that maybe you could work on changing right now. Like in the beginning for yourself, even when everything else is going on. Don't be so hard on yourself. Where's that coming from? That people are saying things like, oh, I'm an idiot. I must be a moron. How didn't I catch on? Why didn't I get it? Why didn't I know? Geez, it felt impossible. I had this gut instinct. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was, What's wrong with me? There's a lot of people with codependency will have this going on, that as you're angry maybe at that person with BPD that ghosted you, hurt you, and or you had to break up with, well, you're also, there's a lot of anger inside people with codependency. They might not feel anger, but there's a lot of sort of self-recrimination and a lot of like, what's wrong with me? And that comes from not only the relationship and breakup with a person with BPD or a narcissist, but it's a double wounded effect of, it comes also from childhood, that you're carrying this woundedness from childhood, that many people after these relationships with people with BPD or narcissists, you are so triggered in your own way that some things start to come to consciousness about your childhood. Or I know when I work with clients, that's what we really work on, and that's what people really need to look at and really work through. And I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you, of course. But so the thing is, what's really happening is not only do people with codependency need to work on the inner child healing, self-differentiation, family of origin work, and more, but what about that internal critic? That internal critic, the reason why a lot of people with codependency are like, I'm such an idiot, I'm a fool, why couldn't I get this before? What took me so long? Why did I keep trying? And you might still be in a place where you might be in a place of all this judgment against yourself and all this self-criticism, and you're still not finished with the person with BPD, or you're going to recycle through the relationship, and then you're going to be harder on yourself. Well, this is like it's the invoked narrative, criticism, wounding experience of not only the person with BPD or the narcissist you're in a relationship with, and all they said to you that rattles around in your head, right? They might have called you a narcissist. They might have just said a whole bunch of incredibly devastating things to you, and then you didn't know because you're being hurt, so you weren't really sure like if they had a point or not, because people lose themselves. So you internalize that, and that gets internalized on top of the invoked, critical, hurtful, not emotionally available, and often for a lot of people with codependency, cluster B, mother and or parents, that when you grow up with a critical parent, for example, which happens to a lot of people with codependency, whether that parent has BPD or NPD or not, and they're not emotionally available, and you don't get your needs met, and or you get parentified, all these different ways that codependency happens, because codependency is adverse childhood experience too, just not to the same degree of BPD. So what's happening is, if you're in this cycle, whether you're still in contact with the person with BPD or if it was a narcissist or whatever, but if you're really being really self-critical and hard on yourself, one thing to know about that is it's not you. It's not your narrative, but you've taken it in. You've invoked it. You've internalized it. And so there's also this inner critic, the inner critic that needs to be dealt with in recovery from these relationships and also from codependency and looking at family of origin work, etc. So not just the wounded inner child, not just the damage accrued from the person with BPD or a narcissist in an adult relationship, but goes all the way back to childhood for people. So that's something you really need to think about right now. And again, once you have the BPD relationship breakup or the NPD relationship breakup, really important to get working with somebody in therapy. Never mind 12-step programs or other. Get into therapy with somebody who really knows this area. I mean, I'm out here to work with you if I resonate with you, because I do. It has to be somebody who understands not only borderline personality or narcissistic personality, but who understands the interplay, the unhealthy bondedness, and also knows what codependency really actually is in terms of its adverse childhood experience in its own right. So if you're being really hard on yourself, maybe the first thing you could try to do, you might be in a world of hurt, you might be further down the road, but still really having a lot of difficulty. It's really important to start to realize that this self-criticism, this judgment, this being really negative and critical against yourself is obviously just further taking you away from yourself, something you probably need help with in a healing recovery journey in therapy, and also that you really deserve a break. But people grow up hearing this who have codependency in their childhood, and that's the voice, that's the narrative. You know, it feels like it's you, but it's that internal critic that has invoked the narrative and is now saying to yourself what a parent said to you in childhood, and what maybe the person, the ex now with BPD, or the on-off person with BPD or narcissist in your life has said to you in those relationships as they externalize out, people with BPD externalize out their incredibly uncontrollable pain, which is not an excuse for what they do. But you just keep taking it on because people with codependency don't have a strong sense of self, don't have self-worth, self-esteem. You might around your job or something, but in relationships, and you don't have a healthy, functional relationship to yourself. So you're lacking self-love. So now the invoked, narrative, critical narrative, blaming narrative of the borderline or the narcissist and the wounding parent in your childhood is, that's what the self-criticism is coming from. That's where it's all coming from. And it's in your internal critic. And it has to do with the internal critic and the wounded inner child. So I hope that you can think about this today. And if you can resonate with what I said about being so hard on yourself, being so critical, judging yourself for something that you couldn't know in the beginning of a relationship with a borderline or a narcissist in adulthood, and that you may still not realize what happened to you in your family of origin. So you need to give yourself a break today. And it's really hard to do because people with codependency often have a tremendous amount of self-dislike or worse, and don't know how to love self. And that's why the codependent patterns are so externalized in the repetition compulsion ways of trying to rescue and fix others, because you learned that somewhere in your childhood, and it's not healthy for you, and it's devastating. So if you are now in the invoked internal critic narrative of a parent in childhood wounding, why you have codependency, and the borderline or narcissist you're in a relationship with, not only do you need to get into therapy and do you need, to get help with that and healing and working through a process as fast as possible to start, but you also need to think about what you're doing to yourself and why. Because it's not really about, it might be how little you have regard for yourself after you've been so hurt and wounded, but it's not your voice. It's the voice of the person with BPD or NPD, and more to the point, even more so deeply, it's the voice. It goes all the way back to the voice of the wounding parent. Lots of people with codependency have a cluster B parent, not all, Many have like a narcissist or borderline parent, with the other parent being a codependent. Some have both that are cluster B. The emotional unavailability, the parentification, the lack of the meeting of your emotional needs in childhood, whether you recall that right now or it was huge or it wasn't so huge, just know you deserve to give yourself a break today. And it's not easy for people with codependency to do. That's why you might want to get into a healing recovery process. And I'd be happy to work with you if you resonate with me. If you don't resonate with me in that way, please find somebody who's really an expert in this area, as many people are, but lots aren't in the mental health profession, so that you can stop being so self-critical, because you're only hurting yourself more now, and you've already been really hurt by a parent in childhood at minimum, and now you've been really hurt by a person with BPD or NPD. So for people with codependency, can't put all that on the person with BPD, because there's that, and then there's what happened in your family of origin. But more to the point, there's the relief that you need to find now. There's the worth and the esteem and the value and more of yourself that you need to recover and find, and maybe find and know for the first time in your life. Hope that was helpful. Take care.